Okay, carry on.
Can I continue? Okay, so if we talk about the request, there are different types of requests. The one is called an RFP, which is a request for proposal. The other one is called the RFI, which is request for information. And the other one is called request for quote. Now, which one would you choose? It is fairly simple. If you want a commodity item or off-the-shelf item, you will go for a request for quote, which is very simple. You'll just find a simple quotation for the specific item. If you go for request for information, then it means your requirements are not so clear. You don't actually know what you want. You first want to go and have a look at what is in the market. Then you would go for RFI. And once your requirements are very clear, your scope is clear, you know what you want, and you are using company intellectual property, you would then go out on an RFP, request for proposal. And when it comes to an RFP, you normally have demonstrations from vendors. We say vendors, we actually mean suppliers. Some people call them vendors. So, an RFI can also serve. It can also serve as a pre-qualification criteria for an RFP. Pre-qualification for an RFP. So before you would go out an RFP, you have already pre-qualified certain potential sources for the RFP. Meaning, you might go out on RFI to 100 suppliers, only to find when you make a shortlist based on criteria. When you issue the RFP, you only issue the RFP to say maximum 20 suppliers. So this is a pre-qualification process leading up to a request for proposal. So that is what we mean by issue the request. Solicitation. When you solicitate, you advertise, you hold a suppliers meeting. If we say a suppliers meeting, we mean once you've advertised in the newspapers, people will respond to the advert, and then you will have a Q&A session. It's called a question and answer session, where people will come and ask questions based on the advertisement or based on the RFP that you've issued, etc. And they will come, everybody will sit in a workshop kind of a forum, and questions will be asked about the tender or the RFP, and answers will be given from the client who is looking for this solution. Right, so that is what the suppliers meeting is all about, all in the good interest of acquiring a quality tender. A quality tender with a quality price and a quality scope. Prepare and distribute additional information if required. This is what happens after the suppliers meeting. After the supplier meeting, the suppliers go away. They will go and prepare their tender for this particular solution or product. And what happens during that process of 2 weeks max, people will ask for more information. And if one piece of information is given to one vendor, that same piece of information is given to all the other suppliers as well, just to bring fairness into the process. Then, after that, the supplier will then submit their tender or their proposal or their quotes. Right? This is all, it depends on which process you went for there, and you will receive, or the company will receive, all of that tenders or proposals. Source selection, what then happens in many companies, they will select a body of evaluators or adjudicators. People who will sit, who's got the technical knowledge, they got the skill, they got the know-how of this particular product and solution, and they will sit on this evaluation committee and they will evaluate the proposals. And that evaluation is based upon predetermined criteria. And if I say predetermined criteria, one of them, as I mentioned earlier on, might be price, the other one experience, the other one track record. In an information technology project, it might be product functionality, architecture, research and development, and also price. Right. After that has been done, the supplier with the highest score will then be recommended to go into contractual negotiation with that particular supplier. Now, the recommendation should be very detailed on why the supplier was selected based upon certain outcomes of their tender. Now, this is very important because you wouldn't want a supplier to have the monopoly in the market. Otherwise, they kill off other companies. You want to be fair, so your recommendation has got to be very strong. Upon that recommendation report will then go to a tender committee, and the tender committee will now decide upon if they were happy, if the process was followed and the necessary protocols, and as per your company policy. Based upon that, the procurement committee will approve, and then the supplier will be appointed. Well, if the supplier is appointed, there's a contract that comes into being. They negotiate the contract in terms of price, and they might negotiate in terms of clauses and terms and conditions of the contract, which is also very important. A simple term and condition is that work hours will be from 8 to 5, and it will be a 5/7 or 24/7. It depends on the type of contract, etc. Once the contract is concluded, meaning you've negotiated your price, you've got your clauses, you've got your terms and conditions, and your secondary clauses, and your form of contract, and your type of contract. In the building world, we talk about the JBCC contract. Internationally, we talk about the new engineering contract, which is NEC and FINIC. So once that is done, the contractor goes onto site, or the consultant goes onto site, and what happens? The contract is now being monitored in terms of performance, in terms of the conditions and the criteria as per the contractual agreement. And the other thing that happens there is approved modifications. Now, approved modification is very same like your scope change management process. If there's a scope change from a project point of view, it will come via the contract. It will be notified via the contract, and the contract manager, project manager, will then approve the modification, or it might be approved by the steering committee. If it's a major change, the steering committee will approve that. If it's a minor change, the project manager will approve that. Once that is approved, you might need to ask for extra money, or that modification might come from your contingency amount if it's small enough. That's why when we discuss costing and estimating, we said the contingency is very important to look for things like these, if there are any modifications. And if the contingency amount is big enough to cover the modification, then we are covered. Then, after the modification, we will then approve or make payments. Right. Payments will happen as we go along. Work in progress, work in progress. As we progress through the project and through the contract, we will pay the contractor, pay the consultant, based on proof of work delivered, deliverables delivered. We pay based upon that, dependent on the clause in the contract.